This is K.M. Weiland, and you're listening to the 47th episode of the Wordplay Podcast. I started in on my cleanup rewrite of Dreamers Come this week. This round really isn't a rewrite. I have a few tweaks in mind, but no radical changes. Really, my biggest goal is to catch any typos or inconsistencies that may have slipped through the cracks during the mayhem of the last go, and make sure I don't have any plot holes staring up at me before I turn it over for another round with my crypt partners. I would never claim editing is one of my favorite parts of the process, but there's something almost soothing about an afternoon spent amidst familiar and loved characters just reading along. So long as I'm not facing down any major plot revisions, editing is a very peaceful way to spend a few hours. Your Story's Clock is Ticking, the latest post in the video series on my blog, uses the classic World War II movie The Guns of Navarone to help you understand how to up the ante and keep readers glued to the pages just by shortening your story's timeline. You can watch the video on my blog at wordplay-kmweiland, that's weiland.blogspot.com. New videos are posted every Wednesday. Meanwhile, enjoy this week's podcast, 10 Ways to Write Skinny Sentences. If brevity is the soul of wit, then economy is the energy of prose. Don't get me wrong, I love complex, twisty, beautiful sentences. As Alexander Hamon pointed out in a recent interview with the Writer magazine, I like to push language toward poetry, to activate the dormant possibilities inherent in it. That's what great literature does in my mind. It recreates the language. It mines the beauty that is sometimes deeply buried inside mountains of clichés and platitudes. However, the possibilities of prose will never be realized so long as it is burdened with unnecessary fat. Learn to trim your sentences into lean, mean bundles of incisive power, and their inherent beauty and complexity will run laps around their former flabbiness. Don't state the obvious. Don't say your character reached out a hand for his glass. If he's reaching, he's obviously going to use his hand. No need to say he stood up, since he's certainly not going to be standing down. Resist the urge to explain. If you've written a dynamic bit of prose, don't feel like you have to explain it to the reader. This is especially true of dialogue, which we often feel we need to explain via speaker tags, such as screeched or purred or stuttered. Don't repeat yourself. Too often we either forget we've already explained something, or we feel we purposely need to remind the reader. Trust the reader's memory. If you said the character's father died at the beginning of the book, chances are the reader will still remember 2 chapters in. Write active, not passive. Passivity not only bloats sentences, it also saps energy. Active verbs often convey meaning much more clearly and more colorfully than state-of-being verbs. Analyze your passive sentences to discover if they can be written more poignantly in an active voice. Cut clichés. Even when they don't take up much space, clichés are so much dead weight simply because they add nothing new or vibrant to our prose. Delete, rewrite, and tweak clichés to create phrases that are new and memorable. Cut ambiguities. Prose should always be sharp and distinct. Never leave readers floundering through weak sentence structures in search of your meaning. If your character is a foot away from a jagged precipice, don't say he's about a foot or almost a foot. Be precise. Cut pointless beauty. Beautiful phrases are the pride of all writers. But if your writing is beautiful just for the sake of beauty, it's not worth keeping. Cut useless flourishes wherever they fail to further the story. Cut the pompous. Inflated language designed to impress the reader with your intelligence and mastery of the English language has no place in your writing. Skip the therefores and wherein's and heretofores. Watch your punctuation. Semicolons, colons, and parentheses all have an important role to fill in punctuation. But guard yourself against overuse. If a comma or period will do just as well, use it instead. Chop modifiers. Nothing weights a sentence more than misused adverbs and adjectives. Use them with sparing care. If you can eliminate their necessity through the use of punchy verbs and solid nouns, your sentences will never miss the extra poundage. If we want our characters and plots to hit the reader to the fullest effect, we have to put our sentences on a strict exercise regime that will let them emerge buff and trim and strong enough to bear the weight of our stories. Thank you for listening to the Wordplay Podcast. To read a transcript of this episode, visit me on the web at wordplay-kmwyland, that's weiland.blogspot.com, and be sure to listen again next week.